Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth defense vessel Titan and watched the stars change around him. The massive ship had been flying through space for 3 days now, and everything looked normal to any alien who might be watching. The Titan looked like a simple cargo ship carrying goods between planets. Its hull was old and dirty, and its engines made the right kind of noise that old ships made. But Jake knew this was all fake. He pressed a button on his chair and spoke into his communicator. The time had come, and there was no going back now. Admiral Lisa Harper had given the order from Earth Command just 1 hour ago. After 50 years of hiding and pretending to be weak, the humans were ready to show the galaxy who they really were. Jake looked at his crew and nodded. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Blake sat at the communications station, and his fingers moved quickly over the controls. The young officer had trained for this moment his whole life, but he still looked nervous. Chief Engineer Katie Phillips stood near the power controls and waited for the signal. She had helped build the systems that made this deception possible, and now she would help end it. The bridge fell silent as Jake gave the command. Katie pressed several buttons at once, and the ship began to change. The dirty hull started to shimmer and fade away like morning fog. The fake rust and scratches disappeared, and smooth gray metal took their place. The old engine sounds stopped, and new ones began. These were much quieter, but Jake could feel the power in them. The Titan was showing its true form for the first time in decades. Outside the ship, similar changes were happening everywhere. The cargo containers that had been attached to the hull fell away and revealed weapon systems underneath. Missile tubes opened along the sides, and energy cannons extended from hidden compartments. The ship grew longer as sections that had been compressed expanded to their full size. What had been a simple cargo vessel was now clearly a warship, and a powerful one. Jake looked at the main screen and saw other ships changing too. The small escort vessels that had been flying with them were also dropping their disguises. The tiny repair ship became a fast attack craft bristling with weapons. The fuel tanker transformed into a heavy cruiser with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Even the medical transport revealed itself to be a carrier filled with fighter ships. But this was just the beginning. Ryan Blake was receiving reports from across human space, and the numbers were incredible. 300 ships were revealing themselves at the same time. Every trade route and every star system where humans traveled was suddenly filled with warships instead of harmless cargo vessels. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity had been lying to them for 50 years. The plan had started long ago when humans first made contact with alien species. The galaxy was not a peaceful place, and the strong survived by crushing the weak before they could become threats. Humanity had learned this lesson quickly when they saw what happened to other new species. Some were enslaved, and others were destroyed completely. The smart ones learned to hide their strength until they were ready to use it. Admiral Harper had been a young officer when the deception began. She remembered the first alien attack on a human colony and how helpless their real cargo ships had been. That day, the leaders of Earth decided that honesty was a luxury they could not afford. They would build warships, but disguise them as civilian vessels. They would develop new weapons, but hide them inside fake cargo containers. They would train soldiers, but call them merchants and traders. The aliens had believed the lie because they wanted to believe it. Humans seemed harmless and eager to trade. They offered good deals on raw materials and asked for simple technology in return. They built colonies on worlds that nobody else wanted and stayed away from the important systems. They were perfect, trading partners who would never threaten anyone. Jake smiled as he remembered some of the meetings with alien officials. They had treated humans like children who barely understood space travel. They had offered protection in exchange for resources and acted like they were doing humanity a great favor. Some aliens had even laughed at human ships and called them primitive junk. Those same aliens were probably not laughing anymore. The transformation was complete now, and the Titan looked like what it really was. Jake could see the fear in the eyes of his crew, but also excitement. They had spent their whole careers pretending to be something they were not. Now they could finally show the galaxy what humans were capable of. The ship was faster than anything the aliens had, and its weapons could punch through any known defense. Doc Katie Phillips reported that all systems were working perfectly. The engines that had been hidden inside fake cargo holds were running at full power. The weapon systems that had been disguised as mining equipment were online and ready to fire. Even the crew quarters that had looked cramped and uncomfortable were expanding to their real size. Jake opened a channel to the other ships in his fleet and gave them new orders. They were no longer pretending to be merchants heading to market. They were now a military task force with a very different mission. The time for hiding was over, and the time for truth had begun. Ambassador Nicole Wells walked through the long hallway toward the Galactic Council chamber and felt her heart beating fast. The emergency session had been called just 6 hours after the human ships revealed themselves, and she knew the aliens were angry. Very angry. The message from Council Speaker Vorthak had been short and cold. All human representatives were to appear immediately to explain their deception. The chamber was huge and filled with beings from across the galaxy. Nicole had been here many times before, but never when the mood was this dark. Alien delegates whispered to each other in their strange languages, and many of them looked at her with unfriendly eyes. Some species she had worked with for years now acted like she was a stranger. Others seemed afraid to even look in her direction. Dr. Peter Hayes walked beside her and carried a briefcase full of documents. He had been humanity's chief diplomatic advisor for 20 years and had helped create many of the lies they had told. Now he would have to help explain why those lies had been necessary. His face was calm, but Nicole could see the worry in his eyes. If this meeting went badly, it could mean war. They took their seats at the human delegation table near the center of the chamber. The table was small compared to the ones used by the major powers, and that had been intentional. For 50 years, humans had pretended to be a minor species that deserved only a small voice in galactic affairs. Now everyone knew that had been an act. Council Speaker Vorthak stood up and his voice filled the chamber. He was tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms that moved as he spoke. His species had ruled the hegemony for thousands of years, and they did not like surprises. He demanded to know how humanity had hidden such a large fleet and why they had lied to the council for so long. Nicole stood up to answer, but before she could speak, another voice interrupted her. Ambassador Zektar from the Corvan Republic was on his feet and pointing one of his 6 clawed fingers at the human table. His species looked like giant insects, and they were known for being aggressive and suspicious. He accused humans of planning an invasion and demanded that all human ships be destroyed immediately. More voices joined in, and soon the chamber was filled with angry shouts. The Nexari Federation delegate claimed that humans had violated every trade agreement by hiding weapons inside cargo ships. The Saurian Dominion representative said that any species that could lie so well could not be trusted. Even some of the smaller species that humans had helped over the years seemed ready to turn against them. Vorthak called for order, and the chamber slowly became quiet again. Nicole finally had her chance to speak, and she stood up slowly. She looked around the chamber and saw fear and anger on many faces. These beings had thought they understood humanity, and now they realized they knew nothing at all. Nicole began by apologizing for the deception, but not for the reasons behind it. She explained that humans had hidden their military strength because they had learned what happened to species that showed too much power too soon. The galaxy was not a safe place for the weak, and humanity had chosen to appear weak while secretly becoming strong. Dr. Hayes opened his briefcase and activated a holographic projector. Images filled the air above the chamber, showing the destruction of other species that had tried to join the galactic community. The Veltari had been enslaved by the hegemony after revealing their advanced technology. The Krindar had been wiped out by the Corvan Republic when their mining operations became too successful. The pattern was clear, and it was terrifying. General Carl Stone appeared on the communication screen from Earth Command. His uniform was crisp and his voice was steady as he presented evidence that humanity had gathered over the decades. Intercepted. Communications showed that several major powers had been planning to attack human colonies before they could become a threat. The Corvan Republic and the hegemony had been working together in secret to eliminate humanity's growing influence in trade and exploration. The evidence was overwhelming, and many delegates looked uncomfortable as they saw their own governments' plans exposed. Nicole watched their faces change as they realized that humanity's deception had not been about conquest, but about survival. The humans had not been preparing to attack anyone, but they had been getting ready to defend themselves. Vorthak tried to argue that hiding military assets was still a violation of Council protocols, but Dr. Hayes was ready with a legal response. He quoted the exact language of the non-aggression treaties and showed that they only required disclosure of aggressive intentions, not defensive capabilities. Humanity had never planned to attack anyone, so they had never violated any agreements. The debate continued for hours as different species argued about what the revelation meant. Some wanted to punish humanity for lying, while others began to see the wisdom in what they had done. The smaller species were especially interested because they faced the same threats that humanity had been worried about. If humans could hide their strength, then maybe other weak species could do the same thing. Nicole noticed that not all the aliens seemed surprised by the revelation. A few delegates from minor species nodded knowingly when she explained humanity's reasoning. She began to suspect that humans were not the only ones who had been keeping secrets. The galaxy might be full of hidden strengths and secret preparations that nobody talked about. As the session dragged on, Nicole realized that something fundamental had changed. The old order, where a few powerful species controlled everything, was being challenged. Humanity had proven that new species could rise to power without the permission of the established empires. Other young civilizations were watching and learning from the human example. The chamber finally fell silent as Vorthak called for a recess. Nicole and Peter walked out into the hallway and found themselves surrounded by delegates from dozens of smaller species. They all had the same question and the same hope in their eyes. If humanity could fool the galaxy for 50 years, then maybe they could survive too. Engineer Katie Phillips stood in the demonstration chamber aboard the space station Unity 1 and prepared to show the galaxy something impossible. Representatives from every major species had gathered to see how humanity had managed to fool them for so long. The holographic projectors that had disguised human warships were impressive, but they were just the beginning of what humans had developed in secret. Katie activated the first demonstration device and watched as a simple metal cube appeared to vanish completely. The aliens in the observation deck leaned forward, and some of them gasped in surprise. The cube had not actually disappeared, but had shifted into a different phase of matter. It was still there, but light and sensors could no longer detect it. This was how human ships had been able to hide their true nature, even when alien scanners examined them closely. Commander Luke Peters piloted the test ship Falcon into position for the next demonstration. The small destroyer looked ordinary enough, but its hull contained technology that would shock the watching delegates. A Corvan heavy cruiser had volunteered to provide target practice, and its captain was confident that their plasma cannons could destroy any human vessel. The Corvans were known throughout the galaxy for having the most powerful weapons. The alien cruiser opened fire, and brilliant beams of superheated plasma streaked toward the Falcon. Katie watched the alien delegates as they prepared to see the human ship destroyed. Instead, something impossible happened. The plasma beams passed harmlessly through the Falcon as if it was not even there. The ship had temporarily shifted its molecular structure to allow matter to pass through without causing damage. Luke Peters spoke over the communication system and explained what had just happened. The human ship could become intangible for short periods of time by manipulating the quantum field that held its atoms together. During those moments, weapons and even solid objects could pass right through the hull without causing any harm at all. The technology required enormous amounts of energy, but it made human ships nearly invulnerable to conventional attacks. Dr. Amy Foster took over the presentation and began explaining the power systems that made such amazing technology possible. While other species used fusion reactors or antimatter engines, humans had developed something far more advanced. They had learned to create and control tiny black holes that provided almost unlimited energy. Each human warship carried multiple micro-singularities that could power systems the aliens had never imagined. The demonstration continued as Katie showed how human ships could communicate instantly across any distance. While alien fleets relied on faster-than-light radio signals that took time to travel, humans used quantum entanglement to send messages between ships. Two particles that had been entangled would always mirror each other no matter how far apart they were. When one particle was changed, the other changed immediately, even if it was on the other side of the galaxy. This meant that human fleets could coordinate their actions perfectly, even when spread across multiple star systems. A commander on Earth could give orders to ships thousands of light years away and receive responses instantly. No alien military had this capability, and it gave humans an enormous advantage in any conflict that might involve multiple battlefields. Katie activated another device and showed how human sensors worked. While alien ships used electromagnetic radiation to scan for targets, humans had developed gravitational sensors that could detect the tiny distortions in space-time caused by any object with mass. These sensors could see through any kind of stealth technology and could even detect ships that were hidden behind planets or inside nebulae. The alien delegates watched in growing amazement as more human technologies were revealed. The hull materials that human ships used could repair themselves when damaged. Tiny machines called nanobots would swarm over any hole or crack and rebuild the metal structure in minutes. Even severe damage could be fixed automatically without the crew having to leave their stations. Luke Peters demonstrated the human weapon systems by firing at an asteroid near the station. The energy beam that emerged from the Falcon was different from anything the aliens had seen before. Instead of heating or melting the target, it simply made the rock disappear completely. The weapon converted matter directly into energy, leaving nothing behind but a brief flash of light. Dr. Foster explained that human weapons worked by disrupting the forces that held atoms together. When the beam hit a target, the atomic bonds broke down and the matter was converted into pure energy according to the laws of physics. There was no defense against such weapons because they attacked the basic structure of matter itself. Any material hit by the beam would simply cease to exist. The artificial intelligence systems that controlled human ships were also far beyond what other species had developed. These computer minds could think and learn like living beings, but they processed information millions of times faster than biological brains. They could control thousands of different ship systems simultaneously and could adapt their strategies in real time as battles developed. Katie showed how human fighters operated without pilots. The small ships were controlled entirely by artificial intelligence and could perform maneuvers that would kill any living crew. They could accelerate at forces that would crush bones and could change direction instantly without worrying about the effects on a biological pilot. Swarms of these fighters could operate together like a single organism, attacking from all directions at once. The manufacturing technology that had built the human fleet was equally impressive. Automated factories hidden in asteroid fields and on remote moons had been producing ships and weapons for decades. These facilities could build everything from basic components to complete warships without any human workers. They used raw materials from mining operations that appeared to be simple commercial ventures. Even the life support systems on human ships were revolutionary. Instead of carrying air and water for long voyages, Human vessels could create these necessities from raw elements. The same technology that powered their weapons could also break down and rebuild matter in any form needed. A human ship could theoretically operate for centuries without resupply as long as it had access to basic materials. As the demonstration ended, Katie could see the shock and fear on many alien faces. The species that had thought they were the most advanced in the galaxy had just discovered that a newcomer had surpassed them in every important area. The humans had not just been hiding their military strength, but had been concealing a technological revolution that changed everything. The Corvan captain who had fired at the Falcon asked how long humans had possessed these capabilities. Katie smiled and told him that what he had just seen represented technology that was already 20 years old. The newest human ships had even more advanced systems that had not been demonstrated today. The galaxy was just beginning to understand how far behind they really were. Fleet Admiral Kevin Roberts stood in the command center deep beneath the surface of Mars and looked at the holographic display that showed the true scope of human military power. The 300 ships that had revealed themselves to the galaxy were impressive, but they were just a small part of something much larger. Hidden across human space were weapons and forces that even the Galactic Council could not imagine. The display showed red dots scattered throughout dozens of star systems, and each dot represented a secret installation that had been built over the past 50 years. Asteroid mining operations that were actually hidden shipyards. Research stations that were really weapons development facilities. Cargo depots that contained enough military supplies to fight a war for decades. The galaxy thought they knew where humans lived and worked, but they had seen only what humanity wanted them to see. Captain Dana Clark commanded the stealth carrier. Phantom and her ship was currently hiding inside the atmosphere of a gas giant in Corvan space. The massive vessel had been operating undetected for 3 years, while gathering intelligence on alien military capabilities. Her crew had watched Corvan fleet exercises and recorded their communications protocols. They had mapped every important installation in the system and knew exactly how to destroy them if war ever came. The Phantom was not alone in enemy territory. 20 other stealth carriers were scattered throughout the galaxy, and each one carried enough firepower to cripple an entire star system. These ships used the same phase-shifting technology that had been demonstrated to the Council, but they took it much further. They could remain intangible for days at a time while their crews lived in specially shielded compartments that stayed solid. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Wright coordinated with resistance movements on worlds controlled by the major galactic powers. For decades, human agents had been making contact with oppressed populations and providing them with advanced weapons and medical technology. These groups had grown into networks that could gather intelligence and conduct sabotage operations when needed. The aliens thought they controlled their territories completely, but rebellion was brewing everywhere. The hegemony world of Kelvira had been particularly receptive to human assistance. The local population had been enslaved to work in dangerous mines, and their life expectancy was less than 30 years. Human medical technology had secretly extended their lives, while human weapons had given them hope for freedom. When the time came, these people would rise up against their oppressors, and they would not be fighting alone. Admiral Roberts called up another section of the display and showed the defensive systems that protected human space, while the aliens saw only a few dozen colonies and research stations. The reality was far different. Every human world was surrounded by automated defense platforms that could appear at a moment's notice. Millions of robotic fighters waited in hidden bases ready to swarm any attacking force. The defense network extended far beyond human territory through a series of monitoring stations disguised as scientific research facilities. These outposts could detect any fleet movement within 50 light years and could track individual ships across multiple star systems. If any alien force tried to attack human worlds, they would be spotted long before they arrived, and their exact course would be known in advance. Human intelligence networks had penetrated every major government in the galaxy, and many agents had reached positions of significant authority. Some worked as military advisors helping to plan operations that would never succeed. Others served as diplomatic attachés gathering information about secret treaties and hidden agendas. A few had even been elected to important positions in alien governments and could influence policy decisions from within. The economic warfare capabilities that humans had developed were just as dangerous as their military technology. Human corporations controlled critical resources throughout the galaxy and could disrupt alien economies with carefully timed market manipulations. A shortage of rare metals here or a transportation strike there could cripple entire star systems without a single shot being fired. Captain Clark reported from the Phantom that Corvan forces were beginning to mobilize in response to the humans' revelation. Their fleets were moving toward human space, and their leaders were making speeches about the need to eliminate the human threat before it grew too large. But their movements were being tracked by hidden sensors, and their communications were being intercepted by human intelligence systems. The Corvan plan was exactly what human strategists had expected. They would combine their forces with hegemony fleets and launch a massive attack on the main human colonies. They believed that quick, decisive action could destroy human military power before it could be fully deployed. They had no idea that they were walking into a trap that had been prepared for decades. Wright reported that resistance cells throughout Corvan and hegemony territory were ready to act. When the alien fleets moved toward human space, they would leave their homeworlds poorly defended. Coordinated uprisings would begin immediately, and critical infrastructure would be destroyed by saboteurs who had been planning their operations for years. The aliens would find themselves fighting a war on multiple fronts with enemies they did not know existed. The artificial intelligence systems that controlled much of the human military network had been analyzing alien tactics and capabilities for generations. These computer minds had run millions of simulated battles and had identified the weaknesses in every alien military formation. They knew exactly how each species would respond to different threats and had developed countermeasures for every possible strategy. Admiral Roberts reviewed the deployment orders that would be sent if diplomatic efforts failed. The hidden human fleets would emerge from their concealment and attack alien forces while they were still trying to organize their offensive. The timing would be perfect, and the coordination would be flawless. Each alien fleet would find itself facing overwhelming force at exactly the right moment, but the goal was not conquest or destruction. Human leaders had learned from studying galactic history that empires built on fear and oppression always collapsed eventually. Instead of trying to rule the galaxy, humans planned to break up the existing power structures and create space for smaller species to develop their own strength. The age of domination by ancient empires would end, and a new era of cooperation would begin. The manufacturing capabilities that would support this effort were already in place. Automated factories could produce warships faster than any alien. Government could replace their losses. The same technology that had hidden human strength for 50 years would now be used to rebuild the galaxy according to human ideals of freedom and self-determination. Kevin Roberts closed the tactical display and opened a communication channel to Earth Command. The war that aliens feared was coming would indeed reshape the galaxy, but not in the way they expected. Human strength would not be used to create another empire, but to ensure that no single species could ever again threaten the freedom of others. The hidden fleets would fight not for conquest, but for the right of all beings to determine their own destiny. The news of humanity's hidden fleet spread across the galaxy like wildfire, and the reactions were as different as the species themselves. On the warworld of Saros Prime, the ruling council gathered in their great stone hall and roared their approval. War Chief Grakoth slammed his massive fist on the table and declared that humans had finally shown themselves to be worthy opponents. His species had been waiting for centuries for someone brave enough to challenge the old powers. The Saurian Dominion had always believed that strength was the only thing that mattered in the universe. They respected beings who could fight and despised those who showed weakness. For 50 years they had ignored humanity, because humans seemed like cowards who hid behind diplomacy and trade agreements. Now they realized that humans had been planning and preparing while their enemies grew complacent. This was exactly the kind of strategic thinking that Saurian culture admired. War Chief Grakoth immediately sent a message to Earth proposing a military alliance. The Saurians offered to share their advanced weapons technology in exchange for access to human stealth systems. They wanted to learn how to make their own ships invisible and how to phase through solid matter. In return, they could teach humans about the brutal close-quarters combat techniques that had made Saurian warriors feared throughout the galaxy, but not every species reacted with admiration. On the peaceful world of Etheria Prime, the reaction was very different. The Etherian collective had built their entire civilization around the principles of honesty and transparency. They believed that all beings should share their knowledge freely and work together for the common good. The discovery that humans had been lying to them for 50 years felt like a personal betrayal. Ambassador Grace Murphy found herself facing angry crowds when she tried to visit the Etherian capital. These gentle beings had trusted humanity and had shared their most advanced medical technology without asking for anything in return. They had believed that humans were fellow seekers of peace who wanted to make the galaxy a better place. Now, they felt like fools who had been tricked by clever predators. Grace worked tirelessly to repair the damage to human-Etherian relations. She met with Etherian leaders and explained that humanity's deception had been born from necessity, not malice. She showed them the evidence of planned attacks by other species and proved that humans had been forced to hide their strength to survive. Slowly, some Etherians began to understand, but many others remained hurt and suspicious. The reaction from the Nexari Federation was complicated because their society was divided into different factions with different goals. The military faction was furious that humans had violated trade agreements by hiding weapons inside cargo ships. They demanded immediate sanctions and called for all human vessels to be banned from Federation space. The commercial faction was more interested in the economic opportunities that human technology might provide. They wanted to negotiate licensing deals for human innovations. Captain Chris Lewis commanded the human medical ship Hope, and he found himself at the center of a diplomatic crisis. The Nexari had refused to allow any human vessels to dock at their stations, but the Hope was carrying critical medical supplies for a plague outbreak on one of their colony worlds. Thousands of Nexari civilians would die without the human medicines, but their government was too proud to ask for help. Chris made the decision to violate Nexari orders and delivered the medical supplies anyway. His ship was immediately surrounded by Federation warships, but the local population welcomed the humans as heroes. The footage of human doctors working alongside Nexari physicians to save lives was broadcast throughout Federation space, and public opinion began to shift. Many ordinary Nexari citizens started to question whether their government was making the right choices. The smaller species that had been overlooked by the major powers watched these events with great interest. The Veltari had been enslaved by the hegemony for over a century and had given up hope of ever regaining their freedom. But if humans could hide their true strength for 50 years, then maybe other species could do the same thing. Secret meetings began to take place as minor civilizations started to plan their own forms of resistance. On the mining world of Kelvira, the human agent known only as Smith met with leaders of the local rebellion. These people had been working in dangerous mines for generations, while their hegemony overseers lived in luxury. Smith had been providing them with advanced weapons and communication equipment for years, and now they were ready to act. Similar meetings were taking place on dozens of other worlds as oppressed populations prepared to rise up. The Corvan Republic tried to maintain their aggressive stance, but cracks were beginning to show in their unity. Several Corvan military commanders had studied the human technological demonstrations and realized that their fleets would be completely outmatched in any direct conflict. These officers began to question whether war with humanity was really in their species' best interests. Captain Lewis continued his humanitarian missions throughout the galaxy despite the political tensions. The Hope visited disaster zones and plague-stricken worlds regardless of which government controlled them. Human medical technology could cure diseases that had plagued alien species for centuries and could repair injuries that would normally be fatal. These actions spoke louder than any diplomatic speech about humanity's true intentions. The artificial intelligence networks that connected human ships began to detect subtle changes in alien behavior patterns. Some species were quietly moving their most valuable assets away from border regions. Others were conducting secret negotiations with minor powers that had never been important before. The revelation of human strength was causing a complete reshuffling of galactic politics as every government tried to figure out where they fit in the new order. Dr. Amy Foster led a team of human scientists to the Neutral Research Station at D. Proxima Junction, where they offered to share some of their technological advances with any species that was interested. The response was overwhelming as delegations from dozens of civilizations arrived to learn about human innovations. Even some representatives from the major powers attended these sessions, though they tried to keep their participation secret. Economic effects of the revelation were just as dramatic as the political ones. Human corporations that had been seen as minor players in galactic trade were suddenly recognized as major economic powers. Their stock values soared as investors realized that these companies had access to revolutionary technologies. At the same time, the major alien corporations saw their market positions threatened by the possibility of human competition. Grace Murphy noticed that the tone of diplomatic communications was changing across the galaxy. The condescending attitude that many alien governments had shown toward humanity was replaced by something much more respectful. Even species that remained officially hostile were being much more careful about how they phrased their statements. Nobody wanted to accidentally provoke a conflict with beings who had proven themselves to be so much more dangerous than they appeared. The revelation was also changing how humans saw themselves. For 50 years, they had been forced to act weak and helpless while secretly building the strength to defend their freedom. Now they could finally stand tall and take their rightful place as one of the galaxy's major powers. But with that recognition came new responsibilities and new challenges that would test humanity's wisdom as much as their strength. The Galactic Council chamber looked very different than it had just 3 months ago. The old seating arrangement that gave the largest tables to the 3 ancient empires had been replaced with a circular design where every species had equal representation. Council Speaker Vorthak still held his position, but his authority was no longer absolute. The vote to restructure the galactic government had passed by the largest margin in recorded history. President Ellen Davis stood at the central podium and looked out at delegates from over 200 different species. Many of these civilizations had never been allowed to speak in the council before because the major powers had considered them too weak or insignificant to matter. Now they had voices and votes that could influence the future of the entire galaxy. The age of domination by ancient empires was ending. The new Unity Station orbited a neutral star system that belonged to no single government and was jointly administered by a council of 12 species, including humanity. The massive space station was larger than most cities and contained meeting halls, research laboratories, medical facilities, and living quarters for thousands of beings. It had been built in record time using human construction technology combined, with alien expertise in different areas. Ellen began her address by acknowledging the mistakes that had led to the current crisis. The old system, where powerful species controlled weaker ones through fear and intimidation, had created countless conflicts and prevented the galaxy from reaching its full potential. Too much energy had been wasted on military buildups and territorial disputes, while important problems like disease and resource scarcity were ignored. Admiral Jake Morrison had been promoted to command the new Galactic Defense Force, which was made up of ships and personnel from dozens of different species. His flagship was the newly constructed vessel Harmony, which incorporated the best technology from multiple civilizations. Human stealth systems worked alongside Saurian weapons and Etherian medical facilities. The ship was a symbol of what could be accomplished when different species worked together instead of against each other. The Defense Force was not designed to conquer territory or impose the will of any single government. Instead, its mission was to protect trade routes and defend smaller species against aggression from their larger neighbors. The old practice of allowing strong civilizations to enslave or destroy weaker ones was officially ended. Any species that tried to expand through conquest would find themselves facing the combined military might of the entire galactic community. Jake's first major operation had been the liberation of Kelvira and 17 other worlds where local populations had been enslaved by their conquerors. The resistance movements that human agents had been supporting for years rose up simultaneously, while the Defense Force provided air support and medical assistance. The operations had been bloodless because the oppressive governments realized they could not win against such overwhelming opposition. The freed populations were not left to fend for themselves, but were given the resources and technology they needed to rebuild their societies. Human medical teams cured diseases that had plagued these worlds for generations, while Etherian agricultural experts helped restore damaged ecosystems. Saurian engineers built new cities while other species provided education and cultural exchange programs. Ellen announced that humanity would be sharing many of its technological advances with any species that wanted them. The artificial intelligence systems that had given humans such a huge advantage would be made available to help solve problems like resource distribution and environmental management. The quantum communication networks that connected human ships would be expanded to link research stations and universities across the galaxy. But the most important change was in how different species saw each other. The revelation that humans had been hiding their true capabilities for 50 years had made everyone realize that they might not know their neighbors as well as they thought. If a seemingly weak species like humanity could secretly develop such advanced technology, then any civilization might be more capable than it appeared. Dr. Amy Foster led the joint research project that was developing new medical treatments by combining knowledge from dozens of different species. Human molecular engineering worked with Etherian biological expertise and Nexari chemical analysis to create cures for diseases that had been considered incurable. The same cooperation was happening in fields like energy production, space exploration, and environmental restoration. The economic benefits of the new cooperation were enormous. Trade volumes increased dramatically as barriers between species were removed and transportation became safer under the protection of the Defense Force. Human corporations formed partnerships with alien companies to develop new products and services. The galaxy was experiencing the largest economic expansion in its recorded history. Captain Chris Lewis continued his humanitarian missions, but now he was supported by medical ships from other species as well. The combined fleet could respond to disasters anywhere in the galaxy within hours instead of days. Advanced human transportation technology allowed the ships to travel faster than ever before, while alien medical knowledge helped them treat a wider variety of conditions. Not every government was happy with the changes, but they had little choice but to accept them. The Corvin Republic had tried to maintain their aggressive policies, but found themselves isolated when their traditional allies abandoned them. The hegemony attempted to rebuild their military strength, but discovered that their former subjects were no longer willing to provide the resources they needed. Even the Nexari Federation was forced to reform their authoritarian practices when their own citizens demanded the same freedoms that other species enjoyed. The resistance movements that had been secretly supported by human agents evolved into legitimate political parties and civil rights organizations. These groups worked within their local governments to ensure that the rights of all citizens were protected. The galaxy was becoming more democratic and more free as oppressed populations gained the power to determine their own futures. Ellen concluded her address by announcing the creation of the Galactic University, a massive educational institution that would bring together the brightest minds from every known species. Students would learn not just science and technology, but also philosophy, art, and culture from civilizations across the galaxy. The next generation would grow up thinking of themselves as galactic citizens, rather than members of competing tribes. Admiral Morrison reported that the Defense Force had successfully prevented 3 potential conflicts in the past month simply by being visible in disputed territories. The knowledge that any aggression would be met with overwhelming force had made diplomatic solutions much more attractive than military ones. War was becoming obsolete as a tool of politics because the costs now far outweighed any possible benefits. The transformation of galactic society was happening faster than anyone had expected, but there were still challenges ahead. Some species remained suspicious of human motives and worried that the new system was just another form of domination. Others struggled to adapt to technologies that were far beyond their current understanding. Building trust between civilizations that had been enemies for centuries would take time and patience, but the foundation had been laid for a truly cooperative galactic civilization. The hidden strength that humanity had built in secret was now being used to protect the weak and promote the common good. The galaxy was learning that true power came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to build something better than what had come before.